I've been told that when I celebrate Mass, I have a resting face that looks grumpy. You know, the people love you when they tell you honest things like that. But you should see it from my chair. Up in the sanctuary, I look out at the people and I see hundreds of faces looking back at me, and all of them looking generally pretty serious. Some of them even look a little grumpy. And I think that sometimes for people who are maybe visiting Catholic Mass for the first time and they sit in the pews and they look around at them, they can be a little put off by that. Maybe there's a sense that they might think that people don't have much joy in them, or these people aren't really true believers and they don't really want to be here. But I really don't think that that's the case. I get why that's maybe not the best selling point for people experiencing Catholic Mass for the first time, but from what I know, after being a priest for almost a decade now, encountering people, I really think that there's a depth going on. I think there's real prayer going on. There really is a love and a joy for the Lord. So I want to highlight maybe a few things on why that is. Why is it that when we come to Mass, people tend to look really serious? First, let's just acknowledge that there's always going to be somebody who's genuinely grumpy at Mass, right? There's people probably in every church denomination who goes to their service and they're in a bad mood that day. They're grumpy. Maybe they hate going. They don't want to go today. There's also a lot of those people who are going because they know that they need the encouragement from the Lord. They need to hear some encouraging word from the scriptures. They need to receive the Eucharist for some hope and some encouragement right now. That's going to be the reality. I've been in that place many times where I've gone to Mass really in a bad mood, but I've gone knowing that that's why I need to go. I need the Lord's strength. I need the Lord's encouragement today. So let's just acknowledge there's already going to be some of those people in the pews. But I don't think that that's the majority of what's going on when you look out and you see a bunch of serious people sitting in church. I think there's a few things to acknowledge here. First of all, when we come to Catholic Mass, the Mass is a participation in the Last Supper. As Catholics, we refer to it as a representation of the Last Supper. If you read the four gospel accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, of what's happening at the Last Supper, all of them present it as a rather serious event, right? It's a somber occasion because Jesus knows that he's going to die. He's trying to prepare his disciples, his apostles, for this reality. He's giving them his body and his blood. He's giving them his blood, which means that we're talking sacrifice here. What he's offering that day is in anticipation of what is about to happen at the crucifixion on Good Friday. So there's a lot of seriousness that's going on here. And yes, they sing a hymn, we're told, at least in a couple of the Gospels, that they sing a hymn before they go out to the Garden of Olives. They were celebrating a Passover meal. And yes, there's a certain amount of joy that comes with the Passover meal of what God has done and what God is doing to save his people. But there's also a great deal of seriousness. There's a somberness as we acknowledge the reality of what's about to happen here. Jesus is about to be crucified. He's offering his body and his blood on our behalf for our salvation. There's a joy in that, but there's also a great seriousness. And so when we come to Mass, we're entering into that, right? We're stepping into that experience of the Last Supper. We're recalling what the Lord did that night. And we're experiencing some of the seriousness as well as maybe the deeper layers of joy that come with that. I think another reason why people look serious at Mass is because that's just part of the spirituality of the way that we pray at Mass as Catholics. Now, there's lots of ways of worshiping, right? You can worship with music and singing, and sometimes joy just kind of bursts from us in our prayer, right? That happened to me the other day. I was in Holy Hour all by myself and having nice, serious time, probably with that resting, grumpy face during prayer. And then something happened in prayer with the Lord that just made me laugh. And by myself in my own chapel, I just burst out laughing. I probably looked a little bit like a crazy person, but it can happen that sometimes during prayer, joy just kind of bursts out of us, right? It explodes, which is beautiful. But that's not often the experience when we come to Mass in particular. The prayer that happens at Mass tends to be more interior. We've designed the Mass that way over the course of 2,000 years. It's interior in the sense that we're listening to the scriptures, right? We sit, we meditate, we're trying to absorb. I love how Gospel of Luke describes Mary. It says that she ponders things in her heart. And so when we come to Mass, we're pondering things in our heart. We're pondering what's being said in the prayers, what's being said in those readings. Generally, when we're doing that kind of prayer, when our eyes are closed, when we're trying to listen attentively, okay, yeah, our face may not be beaming with a big smile in that moment. Maybe it does, great if it does, but very often that kind of interior prayer just lends itself to maybe a more serious look on our face. I also want to highlight that just because people aren't expressing joy with a smile or laughter or something like that doesn't mean that joy is not present within their hearts. I think if you were to stick around after Mass and just kind of watch people interact with each other, the laughter, the hugs, the smiles, people long to be with each other. They look forward to that time of community when Mass is over. I think it's pretty clear that there is an abiding joy within us. That's why we went to Mass in a way. We went to encounter the Lord, and as the Lord dwells within us, He shapes our heart, and we delight in the things that He delights in. We delight in what God has done for us. So maybe we should make a bit of a distinction between happiness and joy. Happiness is maybe more of the emotional experience that kind of comes and goes depending on the circumstances of our day. I don't always feel happy, although I like it when I do. I don't always feel happy, but Jesus wants to give us a joy that abides, right? He talks in the Gospel of John a lot about abiding in Him. That's where we get the whole imagery of the vine and the branches remaining on the branches, abiding in Him. Jesus wants to give us joy, and joy in abundance that abides with us, meaning that it remains with us even in the midst of the ups and the downs. If we have the joy of Jesus Christ in our hearts, it's something that we're holding on to even when we're suffering, even when we're in pain, even when we're being persecuted. You look at Jesus' passion, and there was so much sadness that goes there, but that doesn't mean that Jesus lost the abiding joy within His heart, that He is with the Father. And the same thing with us. As we invite the Lord into our lives, especially as we receive Him at Mass in the Holy Eucharist, He comes to abide within us. He comes to remain in us, and that's something that can kind of ride the waves even of our happiness and our unhappiness. So joy and happiness aren't exactly the same thing, and I think it's maybe unfair to think that just because someone has a serious look on their face is to accuse them of not actually being joyful. So I don't think we should be too put off by the serious looks on the faces of the people around us at church. Instead of trying to measure Christians by the smile on their face, I think we should probably measure Christians by how well they love. God bless you.